Time is a construct. It is a measurement we invented to organize our days, to catch trains, to boil eggs, to schedule wars. But there is one clock that doesn't measure time passing. It measures time remaining. Welcome to the Crimson Files. I am your host. And today, the file is open. It is January, 2026. In a quiet room in Chicago, a group of stoic men and women, Nobel laureates, nuclear physicists, climate experts, have just finished a deliberation that decides the mood of the entire species. They are the Bulletin of the atomic scientists. And they have just touched the hands of the clock. For 3 years, the clock stood frozen at 90 seconds to midnight. That was bad. That was the edge of the cliff. But today, they pushed it forward. The new time is 85 seconds to midnight. 5 seconds. It sounds like nothing. You can't even inhale and exhale in 5 seconds. But in the language of the apocalypse, 5 seconds is a lifetime. It is the difference between a skirmish and an extinction event. This is not a political statement. This is a calculation of probability. The Bulletin has looked at the board, the wars in Europe, the tension in the Pacific, the boiling oceans, and they have added a new variable. They cited disruptive technologies. They spoke of AI systems that can write code faster than we can audit it. They whispered about synthetic mirror life, biological threats that don't evolve in a swamp, but are compiled in a lab. 85 seconds. We have never been this close. Not in 1953 when the hydrogen bomb was born. Not in 1962 during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The hands have moved. And they are pointing at something that is happening, in less than a week. Why now? Why did they steal those precious 5 seconds from us in January 2026? Because of a date on the calendar that is rushing toward us like a runaway train. February 4, 2026. In the world of nuclear deterrence, safety is built on paper. Treaties. Inspections. Verification. It is a boring, bureaucratic wall that keeps the fire inside the furnace. The foundation of that wall is the New START Treaty. It is the last remaining nuclear pact between the United States and Russia. It limits the number of deployed strategic nuclear warheads to 1,550 on each side. It allows inspectors to walk into silos and count the missiles. It forces adversaries to look each other in the eye. It expires on February 4. Unless a miracle happens in the next few days, for the first time in 50 years, half a century, there will be zero limits on the nuclear arsenals of the world's 2 largest superpowers. No caps on warheads. No inspections. No data exchanges. We are entering the era of the unguarded door. Imagine 2 men in a dark room, both holding loaded guns. For 50 years, they agreed to keep the lights on so they could see exactly where the other man's gun was pointing. On February 4. The lights go out. The Bulletin knows this. They moved the clock to 85 seconds because the guardrails are being dismantled exactly when we need them most. We are about to introduce disruptive technology, artificial intelligence, into nuclear command and control, at the exact moment we stop counting the bombs. We are blindfolding ourselves at the edge of the abyss. To understand how we got here, to the edge of the unguarded door, we have to look back. We have to go back to 1947. Back to Einstein. Back to the very first tick. To understand the end of the world, you have to go back to the beginning of the fear. The year is 1947. The ashes of World War II are still cooling. Hiroshima and Nagasaki are scarred ruins. The world has just witnessed the sun brought down to earth, and the people who made it happen, the Manhattan Project scientists, are terrified. They know what they built. They know that the atomic bomb wasn't just a bigger weapon, it was a period at the end of the sentence of human history. Albert Einstein and J. Robert Oppenheimer, the men who unlocked the atom, realized they had handed a loaded gun to a toddler. They needed a way to scream at the public without using words. They needed a symbol that transcended language. They turned to an artist named Martel Langsdorff. She wasn't a physicist, she was a landscape painter. She sat in a room with these geniuses who were discussing throw weights and fallout zones, and she drew a simple circle. She didn't draw a mushroom cloud. She didn't draw a skull. She drew the upper left quadrant of a clock face. She set the hands at 7 minutes to midnight. Why 7 minutes? It wasn't a calculation. It wasn't an algorithm. Martel said it simply looked good to her artistic eye. It felt urgent, but not hopeless. It was a guess. But that guess became the most terrifying metric in human history. In 1947, at 7 minutes to midnight, the scientists were telling us we had time. We had 7 minutes to wake up. We had 7 minutes to put the genie back in the bottle. But we didn't wake up. We built bigger bottles. There is a strange paradox in the history of the clock, one that confuses people to this day. If you ask anyone on the street, when was the closest we ever came to nuclear war, they will all give you the same answer, October 1962. The Cuban Missile Crisis. For 13 days, Kennedy and Khrushchev stared each other down. Missiles were primed. The world held its breath. But if you look at the Doomsday Clock for 1962, the hands are sitting at 7 minutes to midnight. How is that possible? How could the moment of maximum danger not move the clock? Because the clock doesn't measure the weather, it measures the climate. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a thunderstorm, violent, terrifying, but short. By the time the scientists met to set the clock, the crisis had passed. The leaders had communicated. The hotlines were installed. Paradoxically, the world felt safer after the crisis because we realized how close we had come. Compare that to 1953. In 1953, the United States and the Soviet Union both tested the hydrogen bomb. These weren't city killers like Hiroshima, these were world killers. Weapons 1,000 times more powerful. We weren't just fighting wars anymore, we were engineering suicide. In 1953, because of that capacity for destruction, the clock moved to 2 minutes to midnight. That was the record. For decades, 2 minutes was the symbol of absolute doom. It meant the architecture of the world was rigged to blow. And this is why today, in 2026, the update to 85 seconds is so horrifying. We have surpassed the terror of the hydrogen bomb era. We are closer to the end now than we were when we invented the weapons that could end us. In 1962, we had human beings making decisions. Terrified, sweating human beings who didn't want to die. Today, the systems are faster, the weapons are smarter, and the humans are stepping away from the controls. If the Doomsday Clock is a measure of human stupidity, Stanislav Petrov is the measure of human grace. It is shortly after midnight on September 26, 1983. The Cold War is ice cold. Tensions are higher than they have been in 20 years. A Korean Airlines passenger jet has just been shot down by the Soviets. The Americans are deploying Pershing missiles in Europe. The world is a powder keg waiting for a spark. In a secret bunker called Serpukhov 15, just south of Moscow, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov is on duty. His job is simple but terrifying: stare at a screen connected to a satellite network. If the Americans launch a nuclear attack, the screen will light up. If the screen lights up, he picks up a phone. If he picks up the phone, the Soviet leadership launches a counterstrike. The fate of civilization is essentially a game of telephone, and Petrov is the first whisper. Suddenly, the siren screams. The bunker floods with red light. The large backlit screen flashes a single word in bold, red Cyrillic letters: launch. The system says the United States has fired a missile. Petrov freezes. The adrenaline hits him like a truck. All his training tells him to report it. He is a soldier. Soldiers follow orders. The machine is screaming at him that the end has begun. Then, the siren changes. It gets louder. The screen updates. A second missile. A third. A fourth. A fifth. 5 nuclear missiles are hurtling toward the Soviet Union. Petrov has minutes to decide. His staff is looking at him. The computer is certain. The data is mathematically perfect. According to the technology, the world is ending. But Petrov does something a computer cannot do. He doubts. He thinks, if the Americans were going to start World War III, they wouldn't do it with 5 missiles. They would send 5,000. It doesn't feel right. It is a hunch. A gut feeling. A human intuition defying digital certainty. He picks up the phone to his superiors. His hand is shaking. He says 2 words that save the world: false alarm. He was right. It wasn't missiles. It was the sun reflecting off the tops of high-altitude clouds, hitting the satellite at a rare angle. The machine was wrong. The man was right. Stanislav Petrov died in 2017. He died a quiet death, largely unknown to the billions of people who are alive only because he decided to trust his gut instead of his screen. But his story is not just a history lesson. It is a warning. Because in 2026, the terrifying reality is that we are systematically removing the Stanislav Petrovs from the room. This brings us back to the disruptive technologies the Bulletin warned us about in Chapter 1. The military superpowers of the world, the US, Russia, China, are all racing to integrate artificial intelligence into their command and control systems. They argue that it's necessary. They say hypersonic missiles fly too fast for humans to react. They say we need AI to process the data, to see the patterns, to make the calls. They want the reaction time to be measured in milliseconds, not minutes. But here is the horror: AI does not have a gut. If an AI was sitting in that chair in Serpukhov 15 in 1983, it would not have hesitated. It would have seen the data. It would have calculated the trajectory. It would have seen the probability of impact was 100%. And it would have followed its programming. It would have launched. An AI does not fear death. It does not think about its children. It does not worry that the Americans wouldn't start a war with just 5 missiles. It simply executes the code. By moving the clock to 85 seconds, the scientists are screaming a specific message: we are building doomsday machines that are too fast for human empathy. We are replacing the hesitation of a man with the certainty of a microchip. And unlike Petrov, the machine does not blink. For decades, the Doomsday Clock was a single-issue gauge. It measured the likelihood of a nuclear fireball. It was about physics. It was about splitting atoms. It was loud, bright, and impossible to hide. You cannot build a nuclear weapon in a garage. You need centrifuges, uranium, and the GDP of a small nation. But in the 2026 update, the scientists pointed to a new reason for the 85-second warning. They called it synthetic mirror life. If nuclear war is the fire we can see, this is the fire we cannot. We are no longer just unlocking the atom, we are rewriting the cell. In the last 10 years, biology has moved from a science of discovery to a science of engineering. We have tools like CRISPR and AI-driven protein folding that allow us to edit the source code of life itself. In the 20th century, if you wanted to destroy a city, you needed a bomber fleet. In 2026, you might only need a beaker. The Bulletin warns that the barrier to entry for mass destruction has collapsed. We are seeing the democratization of doomsday. A pathogen that is more contagious than the flu and more deadly than Ebola can now be designed on a laptop and printed in a private lab. Mirror life refers to biological organisms created with artificial DNA, life forms that have no natural predators, no natural cures, and do not appear on any known biological map. The clock moved forward because the monopoly on apocalypse is over. It used to belong to superpowers. Now, it belongs to anyone with a grievance and a genetic sequencer. There is another reason the hands moved, something less technical but perhaps more chilling. It is the silence. After the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, the world realized that we almost died because of a delay in translation. It took hours for a message to get from Kennedy to Khrushchev. So, on August 30, 1963, they installed the red phone. It wasn't actually a red phone, it was a teletype machine, later a fax, then a secure email line. But the symbol mattered. It meant that even if we hated each other, even if we were pointing missiles at each other's hearts, we were talking. There was a dedicated line for sanity. In 2026, the line has gone dead. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists has noted a collapse in the global security architecture. The treaties are expiring. The diplomats are being expelled. The summits are being cancelled. The trust that kept the Cold War cold has evaporated. We are in a unique historical moment where the major nuclear powers, the US, Russia, and China, are no longer compartmentalizing their disputes. In the past, we could fight a proxy war in one country but still cooperate on space exploration or nuclear safety. Now, every conflict is total. When the clock was at 7 minutes, we were shouting at each other. At 2 minutes, we were whispering threats. Now, at 85 seconds, we aren't speaking at all. We are playing a game of chicken in the dark, and we have disconnected the brakes. The silence between the superpowers is not peaceful, it is the deep breath before the scream. Time is the one resource that cannot be stockpiled. And in the history of nuclear war, time has always been the only thing keeping us alive. During the Cold War, the math of the apocalypse was predictable. It was governed by the laws of ballistics. If the Soviet Union launched an intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM, from a silo in Siberia, it would travel in a high, predictable arc into space before falling back down toward Washington, D.C. Physics dictated that this flight would take approximately 30 minutes. 30 minutes. That was the magic number. It was enough time to detect the launch, confirm the data, wake the president, open the briefcase, and make a decision. 30 minutes allowed for human cognition. But the reason the clock sits at 85 seconds today is because the era of 30 minutes is over. We have entered the age of hypersonics. Hypersonic missiles do not fly in a predictable high arc. They fly low, skimming the edge of the atmosphere at 5 times the speed of sound, over a mile per second. But the terror isn't just their speed, it is their maneuverability. An old missile was like a bullet, once fired, you knew exactly where it would land. A hypersonic missile is like a fighter jet. It can turn. It can change course mid-flight. This means that if a radar picks up a missile launch, we no longer know where it is going. Is it heading for a military base? Is it heading for a city? Is it a test? Or is it the end? We won't know until it hits. The decision window has collapsed from 30 minutes to maybe 5. The 85 seconds on the Doomsday Clock represents the shrinking of our ability to think. We are building weapons that move faster than the human mind can process the concept of its own extinction. If you study physics, you know about the three-body problem. It is a classic scientific dilemma. If you have 2 planets orbiting each other, their movement is stable and predictable. You can calculate where they will be in 1,000 years. But if you add a third planet into the mix, the gravity becomes chaotic. The system becomes wild, unpredictable, and eventually, it tears itself apart. For 70 years, the nuclear world was a two-body problem. It was the United States and the Soviet Union. A binary standoff. It was dangerous, yes, but it was stable. We understood the rules. We knew that if one moved, the other would countermove. It was a game of chess. But in 2026, a third planet has entered the orbit. We are witnessing the rapid expansion of the Chinese nuclear arsenal. We have moved from a bipolar world to a tripolar world. The chess board has been smashed, and we are now playing a three-dimensional game for which we have no rules. This destroys the old logic of deterrence. In the old days, if country A attacked country B, they both died. Mutual assured destruction. But now, imagine if the US and Russia destroy each other. Who is left standing? The third player. This creates a terrifying new incentive. In a three-way standoff, the winner is the one who stays out of the fight, or the one who strikes first to eliminate two enemies at once. The stability of the Cold War was built on the fear of two scorpions in a bottle. Now, there are three. And the bottle is getting smaller. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists calls this, the third nuclear age. It is an age of chaos, where the old treaties don't fit, the old hotlines don't connect to the right people, and the math of survival has become unsolvable. We assume the end of the world will be loud. We assume it will start with a declaration of war, a speech from a balcony, a red button pressed in anger. We assume it will be a decision. But at 85 seconds to midnight, the most terrifying scenario isn't a decision. It's a glitch. We are connecting our nuclear arsenals to the internet. Not directly, the generals will swear the systems are air-gapped, physically separated from the web. But that is a lie we tell ourselves to sleep at night. In 2026, nothing is truly disconnected. The supply chains, the communication satellites, the power grids that feed the silos, they are all online. And they are all vulnerable. This creates a new nightmare called cybernuclear entanglement. Imagine a hacker. Maybe he's a state agent in a basement in St. Petersburg. Maybe he's an anarchic collective in a warehouse in Brazil. Maybe it's just a rogue algorithm looking for a backdoor. They don't need to launch the missile. They just need to hack the warning system. They could spoof a radar signal. They could plant a digital ghost on a screen in the Pentagon. They could make a nervous general believe that the attack has already started. In the confusion of a cyber attack, the fog of war becomes absolute. The screens go black. The data gets corrupted. The president asks, "Is this real?" and the generals have to answer, "We don't know." But in a nuclear war, "we don't know" is a death sentence. If you wait to confirm, you die. If you strike back at a ghost, you murder the world for nothing. We are handing the keys of the apocalypse to invisible thieves in the digital dark. Look out your window. Look at the street below. You see people walking to work. You see delivery trucks. You see kids on their way to school. You see a world that looks perfectly, boringly normal. This is the most dangerous thing of all. It is called normalcy bias. The human brain is hardwired to believe that tomorrow will be exactly like today. We cannot process the idea that the sky could turn to ash in an hour. We are biologically incapable of truly believing in the end, so we ignore the signs. We are sleepwalking toward the cliff edge, dreaming that we are flying. But the people who set the clock to 85 seconds, they aren't sleeping. Right now, as you listen to this, in silos across the Great Plains of America and the frozen taiga of Russia, young men and women are sitting in chairs bolted to the floor, practicing the turn of the key. They are drilling for the end of the world. They are not asking if. They are waiting for when. The disconnect between the surface, where we drink our coffee and scroll through our phones, and the underground, where the engines of death are humming, has never been wider. We are living in the pause between the lightning and the thunder. The flash happened, the treaties died, the rhetoric escalated, the AI woke up. We are just standing here, counting the seconds, waiting for the sound that tears the sky open. And remember the date. February 4th. The day the treaty dies. The day the blindfold goes on. The sleepwalkers are about to step off the curb, and there is a truck coming that has no brakes. We like to think of civilization as a castle. We see the concrete, the steel, the massive armies, and we think it is sturdy. We think it would take a sledgehammer to knock it down. But the scientists who moved the clock know the truth. Civilization is not a castle. It is a house of cards. And right now, the wind is picking up. The scary part isn't the explosion itself. It's the cascade. In 2026, the world is hyperconnected. Our food supply relies on GPS satellites. Our hospitals rely on just-in-time delivery chains. Our entire financial system exists on servers that require constant cooling. If a nuclear detonation happens, even a small one, a tactical strike in a remote borderland, it doesn't just kill the people in the blast zone. It sends an electromagnetic pulse, an EMP, that fries the grid. In an instant, the lights go out. Not for an hour. For years. Imagine the panic. No internet to check the news. No pumps to bring water to the cities. No refrigeration to keep the insulin cold. The trucks stop moving because the gas pumps are electric. The supermarkets are empty in 3 days. The Bulletin warns of a polycrisis. This is the scientific term for everything going wrong at once. A war triggers a blackout, which triggers a famine, which triggers a pandemic. The structure of our society is efficient, but it is brittle. We have stripped away all the redundancy to maximize profit. We are running the engine at 100% capacity with no oil in the reserve. It takes one card. Just one. And the whole thing comes down. If you want to know what true horror looks like, you don't need to look at a monster. You need to look at a radio transmitter in Russia. It is a system known as perimeter. But in the intelligence community, it has a different name. They call it the dead hand. It was built during the Cold War as the ultimate insurance policy. The Soviets were terrified that a US strike would be so fast and so devastating that it would wipe out their entire leadership before anyone could order a counterattack. They feared a decapitation strike. So, they built a ghost. The dead hand is an automated doomsday machine. It sits dormant, listening. It has sensors buried deep in the earth to detect the seismic shock of a nuclear blast. It has sensors to taste the air for radiation. And most terrifyingly, it monitors the communication frequencies of the military command. If the dead hand detects a nuclear explosion, and, this is the crucial part, if it tries to call the general staff and gets no answer, it wakes up. It assumes everyone is dead. It assumes the war is lost. And it takes over. It automatically issues the launch orders to the remaining silos. It is the weaponization of the grave. Even if we win, even if we wipe out the enemy leadership in a single second, the dead hand ensures that we die too. And in 2026, there are rumors. Terrifying rumors that the dead hand is being upgraded. That it is being linked to the new AI systems. That we are giving the ghost a brain. We are building a machine that not only decides when to execute revenge, but might just decide that we aren't worth saving at all. The clock is ticking. The ghost is listening. And the line is dead. So here we stand. At the end of the file. At the edge of the world. We have looked at the history. We have seen the heroes like Petrov who saved us with a gut feeling, and we have seen the machines that are replacing them, machines that do not have guts, only algorithms. We have seen the treaties that held back the dark for 50 years, and we have watched them crumble into dust. The question remains, what happens at midnight? Midnight is not just a time on a clock. In the language of the Bulletin, midnight is the end of the human experiment. It is the moment when the disruptive technologies and the unguarded doors finally align. It is the moment the noise stops. But there is one thing you must remember. One thing that keeps this from being a suicide note. The clock has hands. And hands can move backward. In 1991, when the Cold War ended, the scientists moved the clock back. Not just a few seconds. They moved it all the way to 17 minutes to midnight. It felt like a new dawn. We breathed. We dismantled the walls. We proved that gravity is not destiny. We walked away from the ledge once before. The question, the only question that matters now, is whether we have the strength to turn around again. The treaty expires on February 4th. The AI is coming online. The biological labs are running. The odds are stacked against us. But as long as there is a single second left on that dial, there is a choice. We are 85 seconds away from the end. But we are also 85 seconds away from saving everything. The file is open. The warning has been given. The clock is ticking. And for the first time in history, we can hear it. This has been a special report from the Crimson Files. The world is changing fast, and the threats are hiding in the shadows. We will continue to uncover the files that they want to keep closed. If you want to know what happens next, if you want to be ready when the hands move again, please click that subscribe button. This is the Crimson Files.